The post-fight speech has become a staple in the UFC and a crucial moment for a fighter. While their fists have already done the talking, their time in front of the microphone provides a great opportunity to interact with an engaged live crowd. Sometimes this doesn't go as planned.
You better not boo me. I tore my ass off. You.
Sometimes we get generic answers.
Give my shot.
But when it fires on all cylinders, a post-fight speech can end up being a defining moment in their career and live on beyond their time as an active fighter. Today we're going to put an emphasis on the post-fight speeches that were perfect in the moment and didn't merely just call out another fight, but created a star out of the fighter giving it, sometimes even through a chorus of boos. I'm Tommy from MMA On Point, and here are the 10 UFC post-fight speeches that won the crowd over. Number 10. Kevin Lee versus Tony Ferguson. Ahead of UFC 216, Kevin Lee and Tony Ferguson exchanged a few not-so-nice words, beginning with their conversation on the Fox Sports post-fight show immediately following Lee's victory over Mike Chiesa at UFC Fight Night 112.
You were saying I had my left hand down, he was going to hit me with the right hand, and he's a southpaw.
Hey, buddy, you about to get
it didn't
in line
even make
too,
sense.
man.
So, I mean,
hey.
let's throw on another a real journalist.
Once their fight was official, it just continued. From media day to pre-fight shows to weigh-ins, the words just kept flying between the two, with the Motown phenom being the main instigator. Lee's brash personality quickly made him into one of the more polarizing fighters on the roster. So with that in mind, in addition to the trash talk prior to the 216 main event, Ferguson's third-round submission undoubtedly fed Lee's critics, including the ones in attendance at the T-Mobile Arena, even while Lee was reduced to tears following the tap. While Ferguson birthed the infamous McNuggets nickname for then-champion Conor McGregor with his time on the microphone, Lee chose to take a different approach. The moment Joe Rogan gave the losing fighter the floor, the crowd began furiously booing until they listened to what he said.
I had to say what I had to say to get the fight, but I'll be back. I'm still young. I'm still in this game.
In a complete 180, Lee made no excuses for his loss, even with Joe Rogan pointing out the obvious staph infection on his chest.
I just had to fight through it. I came here, I gave it my best shot. The staph was bothering me all through the weight cut. I damn near killed myself making the weight. Tony was the better man tonight. Whatever I'm going through, don't take away from what he did.
In the process, his appeals to honesty and humility flipped the crowd and those at home to winning them over by the end of it.
Well, Kevin Lee has been a beacon of strength and
Number 9. Brock Lesnar versus Shane Carwin. If you recall the time leading up to their bout, Lesnar, still then champion in 2009, sat out almost a year with diverticulitis, a condition that nearly killed him. Carwin found his way to an interim title in the meantime, and the giant wrestlers would unify the belts. Carwin nearly finished the fight with a barrage of ground and pound that lasted almost the entire first round. An exhausted Carwin spent every bit of energy trying to get the finish. When Lesnar capitalized and arm triangled Carwin halfway in the next round to retain his title, it took a different feel than his previous revenge win over Frank Mir. The animalistic celebration of UFC 100 was replaced with smiles and triumphant fist pumps and gestures towards the crowd. The antagonistic approach to his foe was traded in for kind words and a hug. Lesnar even had some fun with Rogan by jokingly putting his mouthguard in the commentator's shirt pocket at the start of the post-fight speech. His health struggles seemingly humbled the champion. In stark contrast to the boos of the MGM the year before,
give us your thoughts on the fight.
I love it! Keep going! Keep going! This isn't about me tonight. This is about my family. This is about my doctors. This is about my training partners, my training staff. I stand before you, a humble champion, and I'm still the toughest SOB around, baby.
the kinder Lesnar was greeted to thunderous cheers and applause. While Lesnar's place in the sport is an ever-present topic of controversy, fighting through adversity and his humble demeanor afterwards went a long way in helping hardcore fans accept the success of the pro wrestling star. And then he got demolished by Cain Velasquez. But that one night, he managed to win some of even the most jaded fans over. Number 8. Robbie Lawler versus Rory McDonald 2. Robbie Lawler had a lot to celebrate after his win over Rory McDonald in their championship rematch at UFC 189. Not only did he successfully defend the welterweight title for the first time with a late TKO victory, he also came from behind with a very gritty performance in what was easily one of the greatest fights of all time, with the battle scars to prove it.
Wow, how good is this?
By the time McDonald's body gave out in the final round, the blood from both badly battered men that scattered across the octagon floor resembled a murder scene. With his lips split to near horror movie level gore, Lawler loudly screamed and still in unison with Bruce Buffer.
It's more exciting because I showed everyone I'm a true fighter. I come to fight, no matter what happens, I keep coming, and I'm trying to knock people out.
Lawler's post-fight speech captured everything that has made him a fan favorite. Add the roaring crowd, the swollen face, and that disgusting torn lip to make this perhaps the most symbolic image of the man also known as ruthless. Number 7. Khabib Nurmagomedov versus Michael Johnson. While everyone was focused on Conor McGregor challenging Eddie Alvarez for the UFC's lightweight title at UFC 205, the overlooked Khabib Nurmagomedov was paired with the dangerous Michael Johnson instead. Despite being reported as first in line for Alvarez, his opportunity was snatched away and handed to the superstar. A forgotten backstage confrontation between the two at the weigh-ins and his very public backlash at the promotion for being used as a negotiation tool likely weighed heavily on his mind as he destroyed Michael Johnson while literally conversing with Dana White about facing the winner of the headliner in the process. When Rogan interviewed him in the cage, he placed his traditional hat on top of the commentator's head and managed to stake his claim to the next title shot in a business perspective, citing the population numbers of his native Russia as opposed to Ireland.
Irish, only 6 million. Russian, 150 million. I wanna fight with your chicken.
The pro-McGregor crowd very vocally expressed their displeasure. His balance between a thoughtful argument and venom helped pave the way for the events that followed, both good and bad. And yes, I did say that we weren't focusing on callouts here.
This is #1 bullshit.
But Nurmagomedov said this wasn't trash talk, so relax, it's all good. Number 6. Forrest Griffin versus Tito Ortiz 1. Forrest Griffin quickly became one of the biggest stars in the rapid growth of the UFC after winning the light heavyweight tournament in the first season of The Ultimate Fighter. 2 consecutive finishes opened the door for his first elite challenge against former champion Tito Ortiz. While Griffin ultimately failed to get the W, the split decision proved his worth as one of the best guys at 205 pounds. The crowd let their feelings be known as Ortiz was booed throughout his interview, prompting Rogan to admonish them.
You guys are doing no one any good by booing. It's not his job to make a decision.
The boos continued until Griffin had his chance to speak, admitting that he felt he rightfully lost the fight, and Ortiz interrupting to offer a rematch didn't quite turn things around. However, when Griffin said he wanted another 2 rounds, the purse strings on applause began to loosen up. While his time in the Tough House was an endearing look at his personality, it was here that he cemented his beloved self-deprecation.
I'm not that technically good, I'm not that great, but I'm gonna fight and I'm in good shape. That's it, that's all you need.
Declaring his love for the crowd and gratitude, he triumphantly walked out of the cage having won the hearts of those watching in defeat. Number 5. Derek Lewis versus Alexander Volkov. UFC 229 ended up becoming the biggest pay-per-view success of all time for the UFC thanks to its heavily anticipated main event. One of the biggest trickle-down beneficiaries of that attention was heavyweight contender Derek Lewis. His booking against former Bellator and M1 champion Alexander Volkov was a dangerous style matchup that would push the Houston native to his limits. After stunning everyone watching with a superb knockout with just 10 seconds left on the clock, in what would have otherwise been a definitive decision loss, it seemed impossible to work everyone up anymore than they already were. Before the official announcement was read, Lewis took his shorts off, confusing and amusing everyone in attendance, including the commentary team. When asked by Rogan, he simply stated,
My balls was hot.
With the timing of a seasoned stand-up comedian, Lewis effortlessly combined Griffin's knack for making fun of himself with political humor.
Before the fight, Donald Trump called me and told me I got knocked this Russian motherfucker out because they're making him look bad on the news. You know, him and Putin and shit. Fuck what they talking about, USA and his whole, fuck.
And his desire to appear on the JRE to smoke weed. This wasn't the first time Lewis had made an impression with his post-fight speech, as he's hit on Ronda Rousey.
What Ronda Rousey fine ass at?
Spoke out against domestic abuse, talked about doing number 2.
I just gotta do number 2, that's all.
And representing his hometown. But this was in front of the biggest audience and one he capitalized on. Number 4. Brian Ortega versus Cub Swanson. Brian Ortega's unbeaten run towards a featherweight title shot was spectacular to say the least. The California native found his way to a finish in every fight during that streak. One of the more impressive ones was his submission win over Cub Swanson in the main event at UFC Fight Night 123. Switching grips midway through a slick guillotine choke was enough to stand out, but what sets the night apart for T-City was his words after the final bell, where other fighters closing in on a title shot would stake their claim with a fiery call-out.
Where you at, McNuggets, you fucking piece of shit? I'm gonna kick your ass!
Ortega went in a completely different direction. When UFC lightweight turned color commentator Paul Felder approached the victorious contender for his in-cage interview, Ortega refused to even begin taking questions until giving Swanson the respect worthy of a longtime veteran by shouting him out on the mic before a quick bro hug. After walking Felder and the crowd through the submission, he turned what was shaping up to be a demand at the 145-pound belt into a plea for a rich benefactor to assist his work for charities.
But I'm trying to get the attention of someone who has a lot of money so I can do a lot of charity work. I love helping kids. I love helping people who are down and out because I was down and out a long time with my wife ago.
Citing his tough times growing up, Ortega pledged to use his spotlight as an elite fighter to help those in need. If for some reason your cold heart doesn't find that likable, he then proclaimed his love for his father, who was standing among his cornermen. Crediting him as the reason he fights, he hugged him to the applause of Fresno's Safe Mart Center. Number 3. Cody Garbrandt versus Dominick Cruz. At UFC 207, Cody Garbrandt was finally able to put one in the win column against Team Alpha Male's longest nemesis Dominick Cruz, earning the bantamweight title in the process. While a heated build-up and story of Garbrandt's tough upbringing earned most of the attention ahead of the fight, his friendship with a young fan was a welcome disruption to the ugly drama that captured most headlines. When the belt was finally put around his waist after a dominant decision win, Garbrandt selflessly took it off and presented it to his friend Maddox, crediting the boy's year-long fight with leukemia with the inspiration he needed to achieve championship status. Even Rogan and Dana White took part.
Oh, this is amazing. I've never done this before, and I'm just so excited that he won.
Congratulations to you as well, sir.
Garbrandt continued the interview while making sure to keep Maddox at his side to enjoy it alongside him.
Couldn't be here without
Number 2. Holly Holm versus Ronda Rousey. Holly Holm was greatly overlooked leading into her title challenge versus Ronda Rousey. Rousey had become a household name, and Holm's previous 2 lackluster decision wins against Raquel Pennington and Marion Renault did little to garner fan support. In fact, in what ended up being in front of a record-breaking attendance number of over 55,000 fans at UFC 193, Rousey was expected to put on another sweeping victory, but Holm violently disrupted those plans with her infamous and shocking upset KO. Holm became overwhelmed with her emotion and began crying tears of joy while embracing her family and longtime coach Mike Winkeljohn. While there were certainly cheers for Holm as the belt was put around her waist, there was also a stunned silence in the arena as the only queen the UFC had known was dethroned so soundly. When she uttered her first words to Rogan,
"I don't know, I'm trying to take it in, but it's crazy."
her infectious enthusiasm sent the packed stadium into a frenzy. Not only did she leave that fight with one of the biggest upset wins in MMA history, but she also walked away with massive amounts of new fans as she won the crowd's heart with her performance and incredibly relatable reaction to the whole scenario.
I had so much love and support. I just felt like, how could I not do this with all that love, you know?
Number 1. Nate Diaz versus Conor McGregor 1. If we're talking about sheer amazing callouts on this list, then Nate Diaz's cursing tirade that eventually secured him this fight would probably be number 1. Instead, we'll focus on the equally iconic post-fight speech. McGregor was riding high as the newly crowned featherweight king and could essentially write his ticket to anything he wanted at this point. With dreams of holding both the 145 and 155 division titles at the same time, he was booked to fight then lightweight champion Rafael dos Anjos at UFC 196. When an injury forced a late notice change, Diaz eagerly filled the void. But with 11 days notice, lightweight would have been quite the challenge. So instead, the two would fight at welterweight. The brief buildup was legendary, with unprecedented levels of trash talk crammed into such a short period of time.
Both of you gentlemen, if you don't mind, just if you wouldn't mind counting to 10.
Nate can only count to 5. 10.
With rumors about a possible welterweight title shot for McGregor being discussed with a win, the stakes couldn't have been higher. Diaz, being a huge underdog, ate all that hype in the second round to the shock of many. When asked what it felt like to shake up the world with such a stunning victory, Nate responded as only a Diaz could.
Hey, I'm not surprised, motherfuckers.
Instantly, Diaz had gone from hardcore MMA fan favorite to a worldwide star within minutes, and his reaction couldn't have been more fitting.
They're the new king of this motherfucker now, and it's right here, all right?
You can find MJ, our editor for this video, at Tom J. Moore on Twitter. A big thank you and shout out to Anthony Walker, who wrote today's list. Thanks for watching. Please give us a like and subscribe. We've got 3 new videos or more for you every single week. Follow On Point MMA on Twitter, and have yourself a wonderful day. You love fighting. All of us here love fighting. Mixed martial arts is the most fascinating and glorious sport in the entire world, and nothing even comes close. I have dedicated my entire life to this sport, but let's be real for a moment. There have been a few times where something happened in a fight that made you think, what in the world am I doing?